guys, Miss Campbell here, and today we're going to be talking about the Texas Homefront. So, if you're wondering what the people at home were doing while the men were off fighting in the war, today I'm going to answer those questions. So, let's just jump right in. Although Texans suffered less than other Confederate states because very few battles were fought in the state, Texans experienced many hardships. And a lot of it had to do with the fact that they couldn't get things in, couldn't get goods. They were very expensive. We're kind of experiencing this a little bit with this whole coronavirus thing where we're running out of meat and eggs, toilet paper, hand sanitizer. Fortunately for us, we are able to get shipments in. They get depleted very quickly, but back then they weren't getting anything in. And so things were either very expensive or they had to adapt to it and do without. Many newspapers stopped operation because of lack of paper. Shortages were also created because supplies, particularly medicines, were being sent to the Confederate armies. It's kind of important to keep our troops healthy, or if they were injured in the war, they would have something to numb the pain. Texans adapted to wartime shortages using thorns for pens and wallpaper for writing paper. They just rip that stuff right off the wall and write a letter to, dad out in the field fighting in the war. When coffee beans became scarce, people used corn, okra, parched peanuts, or sweet potatoes to make drinks. Not quite sure why they didn't just drink water, but you know what? Sometimes they need something flavored. Texans also made homespun clothing, which means they would take the cotton and they would make the thread, and they would have to loom the thread to make cloth, and then they would make their own clothing. To feed the armies, farmers grew more corn and wheat and less cotton. It was important to feed our troops. And so crop production increased also as slaveholders in other states started sending their slaves to Texas. So we had a much larger labor force, and we had lots of land to grow this stuff so we can keep these foodstuffs being sent to our men on the front lines. Women and children ran farms and plantations, as did men who were unable to serve in the army. So it could be like really old people that were there, or let's say someone was injured and couldn't fight, so they were there to help. Mostly it was women and children. Women on the home front also worked in small factories and made items at home. So they would have these quilting bees, and the women would get together and they would make bandages, or they would make uniforms, or they would make blankets. They would do their part to help the men in the war. Women also organized groups to support the war effort. Like I said before, these groups made uniforms, bandages, and made medical supplies. And they also provided aid to the families of the soldiers. So a lot of times they would go out and they'd help each other. That's kind of nice. The state's political activity also focused on the war effort. All office holders strongly supported the Confederacy. Francis R. Lubbock, whom Lubbock, Texas is named after, who had been elected governor in 1861, joined the Confederate Army in 1863. Interesting fact, in his inauguration, he wore a homespun suit. I'm sure his wife made. Pendleton Murrah was elected governor of Texas in 1863. Like Lubbock, Murrah struggled with the state's debts, defending the frontier against raids by American Indians, which happened a lot now, and raising troops for the Confederacy. Although thousands of men had volunteered at the beginning of the war, there weren't enough. So in April of 1862, the Confederate Congress passed a draft or requirement of military service. So all white males between the ages of 18 and 35 had to serve, but they found that wasn't enough, and those age limits were later broadened to 17 and 50. And I know you think, oh my God, 50 years old, they're old. They're not that old. They still can shoot a gun. They're not, in the elderly home. There were several loopholes in the law. People with certain key jobs were exempt, like doctors, although they needed doctors in the battlefield, but maybe if you owned a factory, you might not have to go fight. Men could buy their way out of service or provide a substitute. Most of the rich folks that actually wanted the war to happen were the ones that used this loophole. They would make a slave go fight. And because of the loophole, some Southerners complained that it was a rich man's war, but a poor man's fight. Even with the draft, the Confederacy struggled throughout the war to put enough soldiers in the field. They just didn't have enough men. They weren't getting that influx of immigrants that the North was. All right. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to go into the discussion boards that I have set up and ask away. I will be there to answer your questions throughout the day, or your classmates can answer it as well. I hope y'all are having a fantastic day. I miss your faces. Bye.